The Shades of the Abyss. Book 1 of the Living Lore. Written by F. Lockhaven and E. J. Iller.
Chapter 9. Derek hit the ground floor, book up and ready to swing. The blue light from the archive flooded in and surrounded him. It was glaring to his eyes, unnatural light he'd never experienced before. He held the book up in front of his face to block just a bit of it while leaving some space to see ahead. The doorway was enveloped in a hazy aura he couldn't see past, like a gate of light leading from a pitch-dark cabin to the blinding noon sun outside. "Baxter?" Derek called. Baxter appeared behind him, tired from the fast descent but prodded forward, buzzing from the flight of excitement that drove them both. "Is the book all right?" Baxter asked. Derek lifted it up a bit to show it off. "Not a dent," he said. "Hard as stone." "Harder than their heads," Baxter added. "Whatever they are." "Shades, in it?" Derek asked. "That's not a helpful description," Baxter replied. "Your," Derek started, then nodded up toward the stairs. "Your guy up there said as much." Shades refer to a host of different mythical creatures, Baxter explained. He pressed himself against the wall and edged himself toward the doorway to peer through stealthily. He saw through the glaring wall and searched the blue light for signs of movement. There were certainly shadows on the floor level, shades of the bookcases and the reading tables and the disorderly chairs that had been scattered around the area. Nothing standing or moving, though. "I'll watch your back," Baxter offered. "Okay," Derek replied. "Just say so and I'll swing full around." "Well, all right. Then I'll stand away," Baxter said. He waved Derek on and then followed. Derek stepped out bravely, chest out and arms flexed, holding the tome of destiny in his grip like a heavy slab on its way to a lockstone wall. It was less blindingly bright, but more obnoxiously vibrant on the ground floor. The sconces and torch holders on the walls were all lit with the mysterious blue flames. The room felt cold, despite its brightness. "Can't even have normal fires," Derek commented. "Just gotta be different for no sake." "Real light hurts them," Baxter said as he crept up behind him. "If we can find and light a torch or lantern, we can keep them at bay and flee." "Flee where?" Derek asked. "Just hoof it and run 5 days out to Galilee? Even on a trade horse, it takes 2 nights to travel the roads." "Then we'll—" Baxter began, trying to form a plan on the spot with no solid guidance, no experience with the guilds or connections therein, and no assets or favors to claim from anyone in the know who could help him. He was at a total loss as to what to do. Running on foot through the night would be deadly, even without their supernatural pursuers. "Hey," Derek whispered. He turned to Baxter and nodded to the side. There was a figure approaching, silhouetted by the blue lights behind it. It walked upright in tired, stomping steps. The sounds of strained groaning in a young woman's voice were heard. Baxter came forward, hiding behind Derek like he was a wall, while peering around him to observe what was coming. "It's Marley," Baxter said. The girl, disheveled and shaking, trudged forward with her arms limply drifting at her sides. "She's the Night Watch librarian's aide." "She's that girl you talked about?" Derek asked. "The cute one?" "I never—" Baxter stopped himself. "Something's wrong with her." "Well, she's alive," Derek noted. "We ought to get her out with us." "Wait," Baxter whispered. "She's the servant of a nobleman. We could pry a favor if we save her." "I don't like noblemen's favors," Derek said, reacting pensively. "They always rope you into some long, awful ordeal for their benefit only." "We'll be out of the Empire in a few days if all goes well," Baxter reassured him. "We have no debts to be gained." Derek sighed and rolled his eyes. He wasn't having that notion. He'd worked on the ground for nobles, heard their dictations, and followed their strange, circuitous orders. Even if the nobleman happened to be a pleasant person who valued their servants and had an endearing heart of philanthropic good, They would still need a prophet to come out of any favor asked of them. Derek stepped forward with the book down. "Evening, miss," he charmingly said. Marley's eyes were white, her skin gray, her veins black, and her temperance aggressive. She growled and reached forward, arms flayed out toward the book as if desperate to grasp it. Her white eyes started burning blue as she grappled with the edges. Derek felt her tugging at it and was surprised at her strength. She wasn't just shifting its balance, she was forcing it away from him. So he pushed back and smacked her in the face. She barked out and fell over. "I thought you said this girl was cute," Derek said, looking down at the twisted girl. Baxter looked irked by the comment. Suddenly, the lights started to go out one at a time. Slowly, the room behind them darkened. The shadows in the absence of light seemed murky and deep, like a wall of water moving in behind them. "Run to the entrance," Baxter hissed. He and Derek both hopped over and past Marley's writhing body on the ground as she struggled to find equilibrium between the pain and her unnatural disposition. She reached after them until the darkness passed over her as well. Derek led the way and clattered against the furniture, issuing a quick half-curse words with each impact. He could see the wide doors at the front of the cathedral, just barely lit from the moon outside. Then it went dark as if their eyes were forced shut. Derek couldn't even see the book in his hands, and Baxter couldn't see Derek in front of him. They ran into each other, and Baxter immediately searched for Derek's belt to hold on to. "Right so," Derek began. "Just shout if you need me." "If they let me," Baxter muttered. He had nothing on his person that could help, not a spare candle for changing out reading lights or a lantern at his side for touring the city at night. He had his wits, which were muted by the darkness, and the book that contained some dark destiny that Derek kept in his mighty grip. They had no way of navigating and nowhere to go. Then ahead of them, standing in front of the cathedral door, was a figure. Even within the darkness, he stood out as something darker still. The absence of light and his ever-darkening form and armor made them feel as though they had entered a deep void where the sun couldn't reach. Derek held his breath, and Baxter failed to gasp in time. He couldn't breathe at all. They were submerged in darkness, and it pressed on them like an ocean of water. The Shade Lord stepped forward, bearing blue flames that lit nothing around them. His clawed crown and sharp-edged armor shimmered like the moonlight off of water. He came just out of reach of Derek and stood firm. His breath was strange and hollow. It was like he did not exhale or inhale of his own accord, but allowed the wind to pass through a cavity in his throat instead, and his body was dead still. His eyes were focused on the book, the Demondemonium. "What? You want it?" Derek asked aggressively. I'll give it to you, then." His nerves betrayed his demeanor. The Shade Lord started raising its arm to reach for it. It hissed out a hideous sound that somehow formed a word. "Walker!" The voice rattled like blocks of stone grinding together. It was a familiar, uncomfortable, and awful sound that froze Derek on the spot. His instincts as a mason, as a laborer, and as a human being were all tested out as the hand came at him, a single oily shimmer in a solid black sea. Baxter moved in front and put his hand over the book to block it, as best and as feebly as he could. His sudden presence shook Derek out of his stillness. "Get back!" Baxter quietly demanded. The darkness made him quieter, as if the very air was too heavy to let him lift his whole voice up his throat. "Get back, or I'll read it." There was no response. The reaching hand just stopped in place. Then it changed its position. The fingers curled in, all but one, the index finger pointing forward like a dagger, slowly inching toward Baxter's face. He was stunned with fear and clenched his eyes tight. Bright light suddenly blasted away the darkness. The doors flew open and a sun-like power banished the shadows away in the entry lobby. The Shade Lord Victus stood, still reaching, but turned and was unsettled by the sudden appearance. First came one glaring, brilliantly orange light, then another, like two suns swinging in the air before all three. Derek and Baxter shielded their eyes with their hands while the Shade Lord staggered away from them, stumbling further and further back until it nearly fell over. Victus hung, one foot still planted and leg bent, just above the floor. He fell but did not land. With just one leg, he stayed aloft and hung above the stone floor like he was reclining on an unseen band of string. His armor slowly started to regain its blue glow, bit by bit, until it swelled up and reached his face. "Come on!" a voice called out, a lady working against time and reason. "Get out now!" Derek and Baxter, uncertain of the consequences if they ignored the woman's request, took her side and ran toward the lights. As they got closer, their eyes adjusted from the glaring flashes, and they saw a young woman about their age, holding up two lanterns that were blazing at full brightness above her head. They ran past her and out of the cathedral. Once they were past her, she looked over the scene. She could see the fog of darkness roiling behind the Shade Lord. Victus rose again to both feet and glowered at her. She started retreating, her legs twitching and half jumping away. She looked around on reflex and found a standing hanger full of dusty old robes near the wall. She hung one lantern off the nearest branch and took the other with her out of the cathedral and into the street. Victus took a step forward, then put one foot directly in the path of the brightest light. He stopped there, and the mass of bodies that mingled and mixed gaseously behind him quivered in his immediate shadow. Outside, the boys collected their breath for the first time, inhaling real night air, and looked themselves over. Derek still had the book, and Baxter still had his eyes. The girl, Idelle, held her lantern over them and checked the streets for any onlookers. There were people in the distance, most likely guards who weren't paying them any attention, and others down the street braving the night to attend to poorly lit chores or illicit routines. The main street all the way down to the ports and trading posts was alight with the late-night merriment from each and every inn and tavern along the way. "I'm never closing my eyes again," Derek decided. "That was so dark I couldn't breathe." "It's real," Baxter said. "The myths and the abyss. It's all—" "Are you two going to have a breakdown right now?" Idle asked. Baxter turned to her, and they both shared an awkward, sudden second meeting. The unfortunate inconvenience flashed through both their minds, but Idelle was the only one composed enough to comment on it. She looked down at his shoes and pursed her lips. "You're not going to trip again while walking, are you?" "No," Baxter said. He straightened out his overcoat and tried to square himself up proudly. "No, but we will be running. Thank you for your help, and as for why you did it, I won't ask." "You should," she said. "I saw you enter the cathedral and those monstrous things followed you in through that dark, abysmal alley." Baxter's heart sank, abruptly consumed by guilt. He had been willingly denying it for a time, but hearing it confirmed sent him into a spiral of despair. Fortunately, Derek caught him with a shoulder grab and braced him to stand up fully with the heavy book hoisted under his arm. "If we're going to be passing off blame for anything," Derek said, "we shouldn't blame each other. Some stones roll. We can blame the carver or the lifter or the mason or the foreman, but if it hits a man, we mourn. If it hits the floor, we'd best laugh it off, yeah?" "What?" Idle asked in a huff. "Yeah, I get it," Baxter said. He sighed and reorganized his thoughts in the brief moment in which Idelle threw a curled-lipped expression of befuddlement at Derek, who just smiled and nodded. "We need to get out of the city." "Oh, do you?" Idelle asked. "Yes," Baxter began. He spoke rapidly but very clearly and somewhat quietly, which caused Idelle to move in closer, which made Baxter even more nervous. "Because those shades are after the book, the Demondemonium, which holds secrets that they need to keep sealed for their own benefit." The destination that the book must travel to is the Undermountains of Ishma in the Old World, which is an entire length of no less than 3 countries away outside of this one. And the closest place to begin that journey is Galilee, which is where Master Lothan of the Archive, my master, has instructed me to go. I was there for that, Derek said. It all checks out. Ida looked between them. Baxter's rushed, impatient prattle and Derek's calm, apparently accepting demeanor were too much for her tired mind. She was just trying to stalk her father's mysterious customers to prove they were breaking guild statutes so she could cancel their contract and claim a reward for turning them in. She wasn't prepared to involve herself with a conspiracy or a parade through foreign lands. "All right," she began. "You said that book has secrets?" "Many," Baxter replied. Derek held the book up and nodded, giving his own approval for whatever it was worth. "And those shades," she continued, pausing just to digest the fact that she had said the word with the same gravity that Baxter had. "They want it because it will help them?" "It may empower them," Baxter explained. "I'm not sure precisely what it may do." "Lothan said," Derek added, "everything to know about them is in the book, yeah? So maybe a way to defeat them. Since they're, what was it, unlife and anti-living, and such." "Right," Baxter said, facing his friend. "The myths of shades are all murky at best from what I know. But we do know for certain they can't tolerate light." "Come with me," Idle beckoned. The boys turned to her and saw her more determined than before. The gears were turning in her head while they were talking, and she seemed to have a much better reason for helping them than before. "I can get you to Galilee." Chapter 10. Idle guided her 2 miscreant, mysterious allies through the streets in the quiet doldrums of the night. The taverns were noisy, but outside there was peace. The sound of drunkards laughing, shouting, or singing songs changed from one establishment to the next. The working class of laborers and merchants all mingled together, enjoying the fruits of their labors fermented and served with foam into mugs and pints to close out their day so they could awaken in the morning with a headache and a scowl. It seemed to be pure luck that she managed to find the 2 in time. Her pursuit of her father's strange and illicit benefactors was, initially, out of subterfuge-ish curiosity. If they were brought into the city for illegal means, she planned to reliably feign innocence on the charges of aid and claim she had thought the cart was only stocked with supplies when in fact the benefactors must have hidden inside of it. That was the truth, although the participation of her father would be greatly underrepresented. He was knowing and seemed willing to assist, though as for the reason why she had no idea. Even if it was for money, he wasn't foolish enough to entertain such strange and demented actions. "So," Baxter said, "you're a night porter?" "No," she replied. "I'm a regular porter." She didn't want small talk to mix in with her dire duty. She had her own concerns and reasons for helping them. If they had the secrets of the shades in their hands, she would use them. She remembered seeing her father taken by the Shade Lord's hand and the strange ritual that commenced. It was still in him, a strange darkness. He acted normal, but a deeper shadow covered him than normal. "Porters have good horses," Derek said. "We might get to Galilee sooner than we thought." "I'm not sure how to make all of this work," Baxter admitted. "I mean as payment." "You'll pay me when we get there," she said. "With that book." "The book is not for trade," Baxter said forcefully. Derek held it close in response as its keeper. "I mean for you to read it," Idle corrected, "as I cannot." "Oh," Baxter said, You wish for me to pay you with my labor, is it?" "Reading is not a labor," Idle argued. "It is a skill and a trade." "If you'd read some of the things I have," Baxter said, "you may disagree." The small printed words or indecipherable scribbles of handprinting can strain the eyes and the mind as well. Do eyes have muscles? Derek asked. Yes, Baxter answered. Little thin ones, mostly around them. He circled the shape of his eye. Derek nodded in understanding. Idle stopped just before the last turn of the street that led to her home. The lower merchant quarter was the place of all the first stops and carriage rides. It was a horse road, firstly, and not maintained or kept clean for daily peasantry. If there are secrets of these creatures in there, she said, then I want to know them, all of them, to stop them. That's a strange vindication you have, Baxter said. Why take such a personal aim against these beings? We're the ones who were nearly harmed. Mostly unharmed, Derek corrected fruitlessly. It's my father, she said. She began her grand lie there with them. He was tricked. He took in a carriage the night before this, and those creeping figures emerged from it. They threatened him, and their leader did something strange that captivated my father to follow their orders. Please, you must help my father. Release him from their curse. Oh, Baxter said. He looked to the book. Already it was calling to him to offer aid, and he could feel its weight in his arms, too much to bear or hold aloft. He saw Derek comfortably holding it to his side and caught a smile from his hulking friend. He was carrying it so easily, the burden of its weight and importance and the power it had to help or hurt others. Well, I know better than to negotiate with a porter on the walk. I'll try. Good, Idell said. And once he's well, we can be on our way. How long will that take, do you reckon? Derek asked. His question halted Idle in mid-step before Baxter could think it through properly. It's a massive book, Baxter said. Starting from the beginning, it may take a full day to read. It may take longer. It might be in a different language. We haven't even opened it yet to see. Will that be a problem? Derek asked. I only know a few languages, Baxter admitted. That's a few more than I do, Derek said. Boys, Idell hissed. She settled her voice back down and nodded for them to follow. Inside, in the light, perhaps? Oh, right, Baxter recalled. The demons. They rushed over to Idle and followed her in a steady marching walk through the narrow side streets to her house. Baxter was immediately suspicious when she entered. It was a lesser home, unattractive and off the main path with only one door for the garage and only room for one cart at a time. A small, lesser house among porters. Inside was little better. The house portion reminded Baxter of his own home, although less rowdy. It was cramped and stacked with unused things that couldn't be removed. Broken chairs and crates that belonged in a storehouse somewhere else, with stairs to a second story where all the beds he didn't see were likely hiding. Idle set her lantern on the nearest table in the center of the room and gently crept over to fetch a stable chair. Idell? A man called out from above. Footsteps came rushing down the stairs. Baxter and Derek nearly dove out the door, but Idell looked their way and waved them in. Torn between the fear of the owner's judgment over their appearance in this home and defying the stern girl's command, they stayed put, and Derek slowly pushed the door shut. Mr. Lawn came down, restless and frazzled. Dark circles were under his eyes that weren't there before, as if shadows had gathered just beneath his vision. He looked changed and tired, years older than he had been yesterday. "Where did you go this late?" he asked, with sincere worry in his voice. "You thought you went out unseen? With lanterns in hand even before the twilight hours ended? Did you think I wouldn't hear the latch of my own door, and you bring back strangers?" "Father," Idell said, "please stop and let me explain." "Explain what?" he asked. "Father," she said more sternly, with an unwavering voice that silenced his quivering, uncertain candor. "Those men you ported in, they attacked the archive. I followed them. I watched them. I saw their ill intent in action." "Oh, no." He clutched his head and shook it gently. "It's okay," she said. "We can surrender their payment. If we catch them, the guild will reward us, not punish us." "No, no," he muttered. "No, the payment. The payment it's not." He was stuttering and panicked. His secret deal was revealed, and to his own daughter. As close as they were as father and daughter, he knew he didn't have the will to control her as he had to. "We can't return a payment we never received." "What?" she asked. She still didn't know what risk he had taken that was worth the whole of their family name. Some money would make sense. Fine goods or exotic materials to trade, exclusive rights to rate works of art, something noble and righteous or pilfered and illicit, even just a written promise or favor from another whom the guild could seek compensation from in retaliation for abusing the trust of a kind and desperate porter in their care. It couldn't be nothing. "It can't be for nothing," she snapped. She grew flustered and mimicked her father, patting the sides of her head and straining not to grab her own hair. Baxter and Derek quietly moved to sit at the table with the lantern. Derek propped the book up and lowered it gently onto the table. It slid out of his fingers and hit the table's surface with a bang. "Shh," Baxter hushed. "Sorry," Derek said with his hands up and out, a natural reflex to save his precious fingers from a fallen stone. "Sorry," Baxter parroted back. His reaction was equally reflexive, honed from his time in the forced quiet of the archive, where even breathing too loudly was an offense worthy of ejection. "It was for nothing," her father said. "The wares are all dust and clay, either fakes or antiques without value. Just dirt. The carriage itself is not worthless, but it's too foreign to pass. If it were seen in the streets under daylight, it would be mistaken for an invader in the city. They've left us nothing." "What about your eyes?" Idell asked. "I saw when they emerged. I was there watching. I saw what they did." "What did they do to your eyes?" "Even that," he admitted. He was starting to tear up, but held back his crying for the sake of fatherly pride. "Even that I do not know. I see some things here and there, visions that don't seem real made of blue fire. Markings, like sign work. When I reach out to touch them, my hand passes through. And in the dark, I can see very well. That's it. Their payment was in that. I cannot give up my own eyes as recompense. What good would capturing them do if I would have to surrender my eyes to the guild as false payment?" "Those shades," Derek said, "must have strong eye muscles to see in the dark." He turned to Baxter for a reaction, but Baxter had none for him. Instead, he ducked his head just before Idell heard and stomped her way over. Derek saw her coming and put his hands up to defend himself. She glared at the book and reached over to force it open. The lock would not budge. "Open this now," she demanded. "Open it and undo my father's curse." "All right, calm down," Baxter soothed. "Now, as unfortunate as this all is for you, as a porter, I think we still have something to discuss." "You'd take advantage of my family in our needing time?" she asked incredulously. "You," Baxter began. "You agreed to this. You said we'd have a ride to Galilee if I helped you. We can't stay in this city while the shades are around. We need to travel by night while they're moving and rest in the day while the sun impedes them. Right?" "That's what Lothan said," Derek confirmed. They both nodded together. Idell kept glaring them down hard, and after a moment of enduring her intense and focused glare, Baxter stood up and started working at the binding on the book to undo it. Mr. Lawn rose up as well and went over to his daughter to try and console or calm her, or simply give a fatherly presence to the youths who were gathered at his table. He looked down at the book in question and saw the symbol on the front. It was the same one earlier drawn into the air before him by Victus, now etched in shallow lines against the hardcover. His eyes started to glow blue, and all reason and rational left his mind. His skin went gray and his veins turned black. "Hey," Derek called, seeing the change in Mr. Lawn. He got up and prepared to stand in the man's way. Idle looked over just as her father's mind receded fully, and he lunged at the table. Derek caught him from the front and held him back. "Hey!" he shouted again. Mr. Lawn growled and snapped, throwing spittle as he reached with clawing hands past Derek's thick frame to the table. Baxter watched and retreated to the other side, leaving the table between him and the man, while Idle shrieked and ducked away to the other side of the kitchen. "Father, stop!" Idle shouted. "He's stronger than he looks," Derek called out. Baxter looked around with worry. Every darkened corner and shadow in the room seemed like a place where a shade could burst out suddenly and make the situation worse. Then he looked at the book the shades wanted, and the blue lights from the man's eyes, just like the light from Marley's in the archive. He dragged the book off the edge of the table and dropped it in a failed attempt to simply catch it. It slammed to the floor. Mr. Lawn started to calm down. The black veins receded and his pallor lifted. He returned to normal after a minute, and Derek went from holding him back to holding him up. "You good now?" Derek asked. Mr. Lawn panted and reached up to pat him on the arms. "Idle," he said, "you brought in a good, strong man for me to meet." Idle was too horrified by what she saw to react. She saw her father smiling in a smug and somewhat mocking manner as he started huffing up laughter. She laughed as well, timidly and uncertainly, until both of them were in between laughter and scared sobs. Derek lowered the man to the floor and turned around to Baxter, who was also on the floor, struggling to lift the book back up. "Lift with your legs," Derek advised. When he saw the book, Baxter began, his voice strained from the effort, which promptly ceased once Derek took it from him. He lost his mind. Marley must have been the same way. This curse, whatever it is, has normal people hunting the book in the shade's stead. He was normal before, Derek noted. Didn't seem at all sinister, kind of pathetic, actually. Baxter agreed. He turned and saw Idle helping her father up again. Things were taking darker and darker turns, and the night was only just beginning. He made a decision and spoke with all the authority and demand he could muster, as the only one in the building with the prestige of a semi-noble profession could. "Sir, the master archivist has given us a mission to deliver this book away from the city with deadly urgency. The ones you ported in here, for whatever reason, are the culprits of a plot that has compromised your own safety and many others. We need to leave immediately, and as a porter, I would like to hire you with deferred compensation to deliver us to Galilee." Idle looked at him while she held her fragile father up by the shoulders. She couldn't summon up her own disgust fast enough to speak out before her father said, "If that's what you need, then go." He covered his eyes and turned away. "I saw such a terrible thing, and before I knew it, I was upon you." "It wasn't your fault, sir," Baxter said. "Once this city is safe, and once I have learned what there is to know, I will return and dispel this hold they have on you. I promise that." "Thank you," Mr. Lawn said. "Idle, a porter must be present on all deliveries between cities." "Father, She couldn't protest. It was rare, but when her father was of the mood and had good reasons, he could act as a proper father and a fine porter as well. "I think you're strong enough," he said proudly, "to take up your very first night porting route." He smiled at her. The corner of his cracked lips lifted up the dusty dark hue of his whiskers. His belief in her and his pride as a father sank her own ambitions in an instant. She had a job to do, and as a porter, not even the devils of another land could stop her from making her delivery. Chapter 11. The gates to Chechery were watched over day and night by a rotation of guards who were employed by a variety of the noble houses. There was no need for a military presence in an era of peace, But there was always the threat and looming danger of contraband and illicit goods entering or exiting the city to promote crime abroad. However, the gates could not stay closed at any time, as opening them caused a great ruckus and could happen at any time when traders came. So they stayed open, and narrow liners of wooden barricades would line the way and restrict the travelers from going through at any speed. The guards of the southeastern gatehouse, closest to the Porter district of the merchant quarter, saw a cart approaching with great speed, pulled by 2 horses stomping out a fever with their hooves in the dead of night. The cart was long and narrow and lazily covered from end to end with a flittering tarp. The guards tried to mobilize just to see it go by as it sped past. It was moving too quickly, and the make of the cart was very strange. The edges of the wheels were spiked, and the whole frame was braced with rough metal like a war cart. The late hours were the ideal time for barricade runners to make themselves known, as no one in the city's guard would care enough to chase them down. The carriage plowed through the flimsy, spare-wood sawhorse blockers and stormed out of the gates, leaving behind a trail of dust and straw in its wake. The make of the carriage was noted by the guards on response, and the place it came from was investigated immediately. A lone guard was dispatched to begin questioning the lesser houses among the Porter district to see who could have let such a thing happen and what excuse they might have for letting a cart go missing. That guard walked out of the light and into a dark alley near the lawn house, which he set his eyes on first. The carriage hall was open, and the lights were out. At best, it could have been a theft, and the porter in charge would have to manage their insurance with the guild for recompense. He failed to consider something worse and was quickly apprehended by an armored metal hand. Before he even had a chance to struggle, his breath left him, becoming a cold, foggy trail in the air that seeped into the open visor of Victus's helmet. He dropped the man and drew a command in the air. The guard blankly stared and then shifted in place. Then he turned and guarded the alley mindlessly. A shade emerged from the garage where the rest were swarming, climbing, and crawling all around the walls and ceiling of the darkened building. "Gone," it whispered. Victus lowed and nodded. He looked toward the house. "Asleep," the shade said. Victus huffed. "The book was here," he rasped. "It can only leave so quickly." Victus swung his arm into the air, and the shades dispersed to the roofs. He joined them, weightlessly hopping one heel-toe step at a time across the reach of homes and merchant fronts toward the edge of the city, then toward the main gates, and finally on toward the long, rolling pastures that separated the great city from its nearest neighbor. Far out from there, already making distance that reduced the great mounted city to a shimmering pile that rose over the horizon, Idle directed the horses to a speedy gallop, while Baxter and Derek sat hunched down under the tarp in the back as her cargo. She looked back once to admire the sight of the city from afar, one she hadn't seen since she was a child, a sight both boys beheld for the very first time with growing, wistful remorse. "Do you see them?" she called out. Baxter turned back, almost surprised by her question, and returned to staring out the back as the landscape sped away. The sight of his home and his ambition, receding quickly into the distance, drew his attention back down to the heavy book under his hand. His new goal, given but not yet gained, something important but without proper explanation, was right there with him. He turned to Derek and saw him suffering. The parting was too fast for him, and the stripping of his responsibilities, and essentially his past life, was all Baxter's doing. "You okay?" Baxter asked. "Ugh," Derek burped. "I can't handle this," he said. "It's too much movement. I didn't eat much today, but I feel like it's—" Baxter hastily dragged the book from him and hauled it over to the other side of the carriage. "Not on the book," he warned, then pointed to the back of the cart, the edge of which Derek crawled toward just in case. His motion sickness notwithstanding, he also felt a grim premonition of their travels as they fled the city. He was leaving more than just his own ambitions behind. His first thoughts were of his work. "They'll get on fine without me," Derek muttered for the sake of self-comfort. "They've got—" He rubbed his face down as a cold sweat broke out, a threat of sickness yet to come. Meanwhile, Baxter pushed the book up toward the front of the long carriage and kept it under his knee so it wouldn't slide away. "I don't see anything chasing us," Baxter announced. "No guards and no dark entities dressed to blend in with the expansive darkness of an unlit wilderness night." "Don't you dare snip at me," Idell exclaimed. "I reserve full contractual rights to all snippiness from here on in until the job is concluded." "Can porters really trade in human emotions like that?" Baxter retorted. She whipped the reins in response, and the horses replied in turn with a burst of speed. Baxter held on to the rim of the carriage and kept his body weight on the top of the book. It had already proved robust enough to endure several mallet-like blows, so he trusted it to bear his weight as well. "I mean it!" Idell shouted over the sounds of rushing air and sprinting hooves. "First, my father falls to an illness of insanity, all because of that book that the archivist had. If it's so damn important, why cling to it? They may just take it and leave us all alone." "I doubt my master's murderers have any kind of peace on their minds," Baxter replied. Idell didn't retort immediately, but she wanted to, and he could tell. Even raising his own loss against that of her father, who was still well and able-bodied, didn't dismiss her arrogant offense. "We should have warned the guards in the gatehouse," she continued. "They could have spotted the shades and fought them off." "And it would have involved more people," Baxter countered, "and spread a wave of panic through the city, all of which would have been investigated to find out where the monsters had come from. Which would have led them where, Miss—" Baxter paused, just as Idell reached a high point of quiet fuming. "I'm sorry. I think I missed your name. Is it Beetle?" Idell glared back, reached over, grabbed the top of his head, and pushed him down under the tarp again. "It's Idell." "Right. Got it," Baxter muttered quickly. He stayed down and palmed at his head where she had grabbed him. He waited there in darkness, transparent but still oppressive shadows under the covers, and felt a mix of dreadful anxiety and physical exhaustion creeping up on him. It was past his and Derek's routine bedtimes, and they were on an ongoing flight away from danger. It seemed like a perfect time to get some rest while it was still night out, but he remembered his master's words and advice: to sleep in the day when the shades could not travel. His first night outside of Chechery was spent rocked and jostled by the constant rumbling of running horses. Derek's was spent desperately keeping himself balanced, so his face was over the rear back of the carriage while the rest of his body stayed within it. The open back of the cart meant no one could sleep while they moved without being tied down first. The few empty crates and cases that were left behind from the shades had spilled out immediately after they took off. They rode on for what felt like hours. Baxter fought off drifting into sleep by alternating which arm to tuck under the demondemonium so the pain would keep him awake. Idell, meanwhile, was a tireless woman with a will of steel who stayed awake, fueled by conviction and rage. She drove the horses to exhaustion until finally, hours after leaving, when Chechery was as distant as a star in the sky and the unlikely travelers had journeyed out into the long expanses of countryside and just outside of the covered forest trails. She gave them a break. The horses slowed to a stop and huffed loud, grumbling breaths. They were all-day walking horses. Their stamina was better left to slower rides, but they were loyal. "What happened?" Baxter asked. He poked his head up through the tarp and looked around. It was still dark out, far more than before. There weren't even the distant lights of the city to rely on. It was just them and the stars and the gray, shadow-soaked lands that surrounded them. Every dark corner and shadow under a tree were new avenues for the attackers to potentially appear out of. "The horses need a rest," Idell said. "Not a long one. They can walk on for another day." She turned around. Baxter could see, even under the dim moonlight and the harsh dark of the lightless country around them, a glimmer of tears in her eyes that she fought off and wiped away. "Can you hand me the feed bag from the back?" "Sure," Baxter said. He was so immediately taken by her that the situation hadn't dawned on him fully that she was asking him to lift something heavy. It wasn't until he forced himself to drag the bag out that he realized his folly, and Derek couldn't help, since he had somehow managed to fall asleep with his head half hanging out of the back and his arm hooked around a post in the frame. It was a sleeping position only someone as strong as Derek could handle. The bag wasn't quite as heavy as it seemed, but all of its weight sank down to one place, and it had no proper bottom Baxter could hold on to help him anchor it in his arms. He had to haul it up by the knotted top and lugged it to the front of the cart where the horses and idol were waiting. It was just the two of them at that moment, both taking a quiet repose to look over their shared predicament. "Have you been to Galilee?" Baxter asked. "Not for a very long time," she answered. He watched her scoop up some of the ground meal from the bag and hold it up to the horse's mouth. It licked the food from her hand and munched happily. "I was born in the countryside just outside of Galilee. My father took work as a mid-porter out there, taking wares from the nearby storage post into the city. I went with him a few times just to see it." "Then I suppose we'll be relying on you to be a guide as well," Baxter said. She glared at him. The hot look sent a cold chill up his spine that forced him fully awake. "My father," she began, "took on the duty of a porter for a small house that transferred him to Checheri the next day. The Porters Guild, like all merchants, treats its workers as tools rather than people. They had no care for our family or concern over displacing us from where we had settled. They just wanted him to sway at their whim like all their other good little workers." "Do you bear a grudge against the guilds, then?" Baxter asked, taking a short pause to reconsider his line of questioning. "For forcing your father's hand?" She sighed. His delicacy did not go unnoticed, but it wasn't effective. "He didn't go out of ignorance," she finally answered. He knew the consequences. He just thought we'd be better off in the end." "Well, were you?" Baxter asked. "Or, are you now still better?" "Have you ever fed a horse by hand?" she asked, completely denying and abandoning the subject as a mercy killing for the awkward host of bad questions. "I haven't," Baxter admitted. "Horses intimidate me. They're very large and can kill a man with a single kick, as I've read." "Only if you scare them," she said. "And they can't kick you from the front." "I also read," Baxter said as he took a scoop of food for the other waiting horse, "that a horse once bit off a man's hand and ate it in front of him, chewed it up and swallowed it, bones and all." "What kind of person would write about such a thing?" she asked. "It could have been real," Baxter said. "I think tonight we should all be in agreement that there are things in the world that may be unwritten, but are far stranger than the myths and legends and writings of fanciful fiction." "Right," she muttered. They drifted back into tired silence as the horses ate. Baxter felt the wet, slimy drag of the horse's tongue across his hand. Somehow that action reminded him of his brothers at home. He wondered if he was even missed at all, or if he'd ever return. Chapter 12. Day broke over the Vincian countryside. The threat of darkness and the creatures that moved within it were gone. Across the many plains, through the wide, wild forests, and around the rolling hills and alpine mountains that tore across the Empire's lands, many people moved about their daily routines and began the process that kept the Empire alive and flourishing. Trade began before daybreak and would continue past setting suns and throughout dark nights. The day was the finest time for traveling. Even during storms, there would be some light to guide them. The trade roads were well established and secure, with multiple checkpoints and trading posts owned and supplied by the hunting lodges and subsistence farmers who worked far away from the city-state centers. It was the noblest profession, honored even more highly than the nobles themselves. The merchants created value and sustained a massive economy, which supported the entire empire, while the nobles sat around tables in parlors inside of fancy mansions, deciding how much of that money they should spend on art and finery. The system turned many people like cogs in a great construction. Idle was one of those cogs, as was Derek, and further removed from the metaphor was Baxter, whose role to play expanded far beyond the slight reaches of matters of the economy. He stirred from his sleep with an eerie premonition plaguing his mind. His hand reached over and clasped at an invisible quill as his wrist gesticulated across a phantom sheet of paper. His first sleep outside of the long reach of Chechery's relative safety, and he wasn't even aware of it until after his hand stopped moving. "Hey," Derek said. Baxter awoke with a start. He sat up and only half opened his eyes to a blazing bright glare that sent him right back down again. The mid-morning sun hit him in the face with more stark force than it ever could through his window. There were no walls or neighbors or mountain to stop its glaring power anymore. Not even a roof. Just a long cloth tarp acting as a waist-high roof to their backless carriage. "You okay?" Derek asked. "Your hand was going all over." "Ah, yeah," Baxter groaned. "I write when I wake up." "Does everyone do that when they learn to read?" Derek asked. "No, only me," Baxter replied, "because I want to remember what I dreamed about." "Oh, so what was it?" Derek asked. Baxter sighed and shrugged. "Well, I didn't write it down, so now I can't remember." Derek nodded deeply. He was sitting over the edge of the back of the cart. Baxter joined him, and he dragged the book closer so he could try and lift it up into his lap. "You want I should try and open that?" Derek asked. Baxter just gave him a look, and he immediately relented. The book was sealed, that was true, but it wasn't bound up without intention. It was sealed for a reason, so only someone worthy of reading it could open it. The lock wasn't the kind that could just be pried away and broken off. "Are we still moving?" Baxter asked. "No, praise be," Derek answered with a sigh. "When we do move again, I'm sitting up front. Apparently that helps to handle the travel sickness better." "Did Idle tell you that?" Baxter asked. "Yeah. I'm trusting her on this. She drove us a whole day's travel away. We're close to a trading port, apparently." Baxter looked out at their surroundings. It was unrecognizable wilderness. Nothing even looked like the long, expansive horizon outside of Chechery's walls that he could discern. The slightly familiar rolls and lulls of the land, often covered in fog from the morning and darkened with mist by night, were gone and replaced by an unimpeded, wide-open landscape of uncut woods and mountains that looked naked without the high-rising lights of cathedral glass and royal palatial homes crowning them. "It's quiet out here," Baxter noted. "Yeah," Derek agreed. He sniffed the air and sighed. "We don't have any food but for that of the horses." "Do we really not?" Baxter asked. "We really don't," Derek replied. They took off the tarp together and bundled it up along the side. In the uncovered back, they saw a rolled-up bag of feed, good for another day of travel, an empty bucket, and the book. That was it. They had left in such a hurry, and a worthy one at that they failed to pack any supplies for their journey. Baxter and Derek both sighed at the realization and sat back up on the edge of the wagon. "The human body," Baxter recited, "is capable of surviving for a week without food in ideal conditions while exerting minimal movement. What about unideal, and while walking the rest of the way if the horses give up?" Derek asked. "And 3 days without water," Baxter added. Derek leaned back and sighed. "Where is Ms. Idell now?" Off," Derek replied. She went off to the woods to hunt up some food. Some berries and plants for breakfast and lunch then, Baxter said. He thought about his lost daily routine, his light breakfast leading into an absent-minded lunch and a late dinner at home after his brothers had retired for the night or before they returned home at all. The sumptuous bacon and glistening breads they ate, all dipped and soaked in sticky honey, seemed like distant dreams instead of the reviled messes they actually were. If he were lucky, they wouldn't notice his absence for a few days at least, and if he was luckier, Master Lothan would advise them of his mission. His head sank when he thought of his master. He left him lying down, bleeding and motionless. It very well could have been their final parting, and he gave him no words of his own deep feelings. His appreciation, gratitude, and sadness to be gone from him had all been left unsaid. What remained was the shame of an apprentice who had left his master early, and the likely equal shame felt by a master who failed to pass all his teaching on in time. "Hey," Derek said. He noticed Baxter was growing wistful and grim and patted him on the back gently to stir him out of his thoughts. He lifted the book up and set it on Baxter's lap. The weight made his friend gasp. "You want to set it on my lap instead?" Derek offered. "Just leave it on the floor," Baxter instructed. Derek picked it up and Baxter stood. He lifted his legs high to stretch them. The wagon's tail was just under chest height for Baxter, about 3 feet off the ground, and far lower for Derek, who leaned down on his elbows to look it over. In the bright light, the book seemed grander and less menacing. The leather was fine and well-aged. The metal working within it was also expertly done and seamless. The crafting of the book was to be admired, independent of its contents. "Right," Baxter began. "Let's open it." "Let me know if you need my help," Derek said. Baxter worked at the lock and found that it was knotted on the unseen underside. He felt around for a beginning or end to the cords. They felt thin and tightly wound, like the cords of a book spine. He tried to crane his head down against the flat of the wagon bed to get an angle at what he was messing with, but the latch was too narrow for light to shine on. "At your leisure, then," Derek said. He looked up and leaned his back against the carriage. His weight, plus the weight of the book and of Baxter partially on top of the vehicle, gave just enough of a grade to the platform that the book was caught in the gravity trap and slid away from Baxter's hands. It fell and landed on its spine. Then it opened before Baxter could even reach out powerlessly to try and stop it. "Oops," Derek said. "I broke it." "Did you, though?" Baxter asked. He reached down and tried to lift it. Derek helped him, but only a little. With its weight dispersed and the pages having flowed toward the middle, it felt strangely lighter. Baxter set it back down and looked over the latch again. The cords were all lined up and untangled from each other. He tested the latch with a careful hand. Just lifting half of the cover was like correcting a fallen table, even without the weight of the pages as they all fell against each other. "Well, if that's all it takes to open," Derek said. "I'm surprised it wasn't open this whole time." "It may have been," Baxter suggested, "and you wound up locking it." "I can't even read," Derek said defensively. "You can't expect me to know about the ways of locks on books." Baxter smirked. His analysis drew him to conclude that he didn't understand how the locking worked, but if there was any clue as to how to open it again, the book itself would probably have the instructions. "Right, so what is this all about?" "Skip to the part about the shades," Derek recommended. "That seems to be the most important matter." "I don't even know where that would be," Baxter argued. He flipped through the first few pages. The first image both boys saw was of a man holding the very book they read, framed along the edges with text in a scrolling fashion that wrapped and curved around him. The words went from one script to another. Most of them were unknown to Baxter and put his stomach in a nervous knot. A book he couldn't read was only worth its weight in Derek's hands. Then he saw a font he recognized and a script he could read. "It's a name," Baxter realized. The whole lot of it? Derek asked. Baxter pointed. The script was familiar, close enough to the common language of Vincia, but much older. Platius Orleus, Baxter read. Hence did I go, to find the strangest things I could, and found them. What does that mean? Derek asked, besides the obvious. It's the author, Baxter said. He pointed to the illustration, tapping around the man's face. He was garbed in old-world clothing, long and draping robes combined with tight, shoulder-strapped armor. He sported a shallow beard a shade brighter than his skin, and his eyes were drawn wider than they should have been. It was, in Baxter's view, an overall amateurish but decent illustration, most likely done by the author himself. He must have been an explorer and wrote of all his findings here. Oh, Derek said. He stood up and stretched his back. So, get to the part with how he fought off the shades, then. Just hold on, Baxter said. Books aren't meant to be rushed through and skipped along. This is the life's work of a man. A year of his journeys could have taken him 10 to fully explain and elaborate upon. I doubt he spent a few days of those years on the drawings, Derek remarked. The quip made Baxter chuckle slightly, but he composed himself again to continue his point. Everything in this book must be useful. If there was just one part meant to be forbidden, it could have been removed long ago and put somewhere safer. That book is a safe, Derek added. Heavy as. There's context to consider, Baxter pressed. There's an order in which this book was written and meant to be read. I'd like to find that order first and understand the perspective it was given. Then, his voice accelerated to the point where Derek knew he couldn't interrupt again. We can seek the answers through interpretation. The exploits this man recorded will have an angle to their view, which will make it less ideal for pure education because it lacks a critical eye. Just like a man who's never seen a horse may make the wrong assumptions of its purpose in nature, should he see one and describe it on the spot to a private audience. I must find the purpose of the writing through the text, work through that context into the narrative to find meaning, and then determine the order in which his knowledge was taken down to even find where the section on shades might be. Can you read it out for me? Derek asked. He hopped up and sat next to the book while Baxter rolled his eyes and nodded. I intended to, he said, and for Idle, if she ever comes back. Well, if she doesn't, Derek said as he craned his neck back to the front of the wagon. We can still eat. Baxter looked ahead where Derek's eyes wandered and saw only the horses. He curled his lip up in disgust. It's not that bad of a meat. We need them to take us to Galilee, Baxter exclaimed. Oh, for certain, Derek said. We need one of them, maybe. I'd think we'd need them both, Baxter argued. Hey! Idle shouted. She came into sight just in time to hear the tail end of their bickering and approached with a tired scowl and a rope at her side, attached to which was a collection of hairs. She raised her bounty and slapped it onto the wagon. Baxter covered the book protectively from the potential spray of dead rabbit blood. Oh, good, she said. You're finally reading. I thought you'd been bluffing about it the whole time. Why would I work at the archive if I couldn't read? Baxter asked. She shrugged and sighed, then pointed to Derek. Your turn. Can I set the fire here? He asked as he gestured to the ground. I don't want to miss the book reading. We're eating those? Baxter asked, staring at the rabbits. It's meat, she answered. Baxter turned to her and looked her over. Her porter's apron and peasant dress looked dirtier around the knees than he remembered. Thank you, he said. I wasn't aware any hunting was going on. Well, she began with a sigh and a forced, cordial tone. We left in such a hurry, and without any planning aside from a destination that I neglected to bring with us sufficient water or provisions from the storehouse, which was nearly barren, by the way, or any money. The only thing I was lucky to keep was my porter's sign on my dress. At the least, with this, they will see it and know that I can do business within the city, so we don't have to sneak in like criminals. That is good. Baxter nodded. And I also have no money, which means... It's either this or grass, Idelle finished for him. She made a smug gesture at him and patted the page of the book. Or you could eat the paper. This paper is probably older than this country, Baxter said in offense. She unlatched a rabbit from the cluster and took a knife out of her boot. It's probably rotten then, she said. She began skinning the rabbit right on the road while Derek hauled an armful of sticks into a ditch just off to the side. Baxter sighed and shut the book, making sure the latch did not connect and lock itself again. The reading could wait.
If you're enjoying our audio content, please like and subscribe. It's the best way to help out the channel.